Welcome to the Journos. I'm Peter Martin. Delighted you could join us, and what a star-studded lineup we have today. Stephen McGowan, Graham McGarry, and Gordon Parks. It's almost, I feel like Barry Ferguson. I feel as if I've made so many changes to the lineup just to make.
I'm just glad that you got me and him distance apart. That's a start, right?
Yeah.
Safer.
Well, the good thing about it is I am well used to, since all those years ago, understanding friction between journalists. so that doesn't worry me in any.
That's the right wing.
No point in the finger at me.
The right wing in a black shirt and I'm in the left wing. So I think that's just about it.
Absolutely. And both of you have got something in common. You equally give the ball away in possession when we look as if we're going to score. So I'm delighted to have you here. And Graham, you're here to try and keep the peace. Simple as that. Lots to talk about. You can give us your point of view as well. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. And thank you to everyone who's responded so positively, especially to this programme where, of course, we get the thoughts of journos on the burning issues domestically and slightly further afield. I always like this topic that comes up every year, regardless of who wins the league. Will there be a guard of honour, Stephen McGowan, at your greatest rivals?
Thanks for giving me that one first.
Yeah, I mean, do we need to give that any oxygen any year regardless? Because
it's contrived nonsense. It's contrived nonsense. It's just, no one really cares about the guard of honour. What they care about is embarrassing the other team. So if you're the winner, you want desperately to be denied the guard of honour so you can take moral superiority from that. If you're the loser, you don't want to give it because you don't want to give the other lot any credit. So to me, it's all nonsense. Just forget it. I mean, listen, I think as a media, we're probably culpable in this because we do dredge it up every year. We all do. I don't think it matters. I don't think it's important. I just think it's contrived.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that you should just bin it, even if it was like Celtic playing Dundee United. Just bin it because it's just a nonsense.
Yeah, they do it because they're told. They don't mean it.
Yeah.
Of course they don't mean it. But it's a date for your diary. It's like poppies or no poppies. These things you can always bank on. And you'll get headlines on it and you'll get, listen, it fuels the fire, doesn't it? I think it is completely contrived nonsense. And it's choice again, right? Mark of respect that other clubs do it, that other countries do it for other clubs. They do. Not in the west of Scotland, they don't. And
Yeah.
they shouldn't.
Well, that's just an indication of, it's not so much backward. It's just a case of, as Stephen said, it's a noise up.
Totally, aye, and honestly, I couldn't care less. It's one of these things that sometimes it gets brought up in morning meetings and your heart sinks and you think, oh, please, somebody else get handed this grenade, do you know what I mean? So, no, I'm with the guys on this one. No, just every year we talk about it, every year it's the same debate, and every year I couldn't care less.
Football's a game of rivalry.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having football rivals and detesting them. That's the nature of the beast. So, okay, you talk about professional respect. I'm sure there is professional respect between the players when all's said and done. But in terms of taking the respect that far, it's not necessary.
The thing is, the position is entirely on who's the champion. So if your team wins, you say it's a lack of respect not to give it. And if your team is second place, you say, well, don't give them it, so...
Yeah. Okay, all three of you have fairly kicked that one right out into left field.
Next.
And to be fair, you are the main perpetrators of that nonsense. But nevertheless, let's crack on. Scottish Cup semi-finals to look forward to. Hearts, Aberdeen and St Johnstone against Celtic. It's an interesting one because obviously I'm looking, and we'll talk about Hearts and Hibs and the bragging rights in the capital city and where it's gone right for one and so wrong for the other with the top six and bottom six split. But as the semi-finals come forward, is Neil Critchley really under pressure if they fall at the semi-final stage to Aberdeen? Because I'm certainly getting grumblings of discontent from Jambos who've looked and said the football, with Jamestown Analytics, whatever you want to call it, is not delivering what it should have for a club the size of Hearts. They failed to get into the top six. And when I looked at their stats, Neil Critchley's won 15 matches, 6 draws, 12 defeats, only 9 wins in the league. And they've conceded 44 goals, scored 43, And from 31 goals last season, Lawrence Shankland's got 4, and they're not in the top 6.
Yeah, well, let's remember where they started. When he came in, I think it was 7 or 8 games played, and they were rock bottom of the table on 2 points. So he has got things significantly better, but his win rate is still 41%. I think he really is walking a tightrope. I think it's just a little bit too soon to be talking about this. But if he loses on Saturday, yeah, he will come under massive pressure. Partly because the average life expectancy of a manager these days is shorter than your average fly. It's an incredibly precarious job, and everybody looks and blames the manager. For me, I think if you're looking at Hearts, you should be looking a bit above that to the player recruitment that I've had in recent years. Look at some of the signings they made, and remember the hype around Garang Kuol, yeah, remember the Australian kid. You look at when Celtic signed Japanese players, they did it well by and large. When Hearts did it, they brought in Oda, they brought in Tagaya, was it? And you know they came so and didn't really do anything. Remember Keogh, the midfielder Keogh. I mean, they've signed a succession of players, and of course you look at the right back, is it Jared Taylor, is it? Who had a brilliant game in the first day of the season against Rangers in a 0-0, and has been pretty hopeless since. So for me, a team is only ever as good as its recruitment. The manager can only ever work with the tools he has. And ultimately, I don't really think anybody thinks that Neil Critchley has been making the signings. So I think he's been dealt a bit of a busted hand. And I would hope Jamestown Analytics will make a difference. You look at Cabango and guys like that, they've been decent signings.
What we concern me though, Stephen, I mean, I was working at Celtic Park on Saturday, but I got back to Fir Park for the last 20 minutes. There are a couple of things concerned me. Recruitment is major, you know, and what is actually concerning is the signings they made in January. You know, the likes of Khartoum just doesn't look physically up to the Scottish game. They didn't sign a right back, which was bonkers to me.
Well, they have now, haven't they? They've signed the Valerenga captain.
Yeah, so they've addressed that at least, but in January they actually have been top of the business. And also just how weak and how sort of, there was no urgency about them at all. They knew a win was going to take them in the top 6. They had a massive support through at Fir Park. And honestly, it was like walking into a pre-season friendly. There was nothing about them at all.
Stephen makes a point which is spot on. The manager's only as good as the players that are arriving. I look at the structure, I'm through at Hearts quite a lot, and I look at the sporting director, Graham Jones, who's a sports scientist, who's not got the football acumen, for me, the pedigree, the contact base. Shelley Kerr's been brought in, I don't know why she's there. Neil Critchley's got his hands tied to a degree, and I look at the structure, it's an unconvincing backroom. It's unconvincing at boardroom level, and I think that's the evidence, as we're seeing. It's a season-saving event at Hampden. Even if they get to the final, I just look at structure and I think it's weak.
Yeah, with that in mind, I mean, I thought top 6 was the least they should have been hoping for when you consider the financial strength that they've got over St Mirren, who made it there. The other aspect of it is, you know, we can dissect some of the people who they've been brought in to try and recruit the right type of player, but your eyes don't deceive you, Stephen. And I'm watching them against Dundee United. Didn't look as if they were at the races in that match. Then I went to Fir Park at the weekend, and I thought, as you said, it wasn't so much that it looked like a pre-season friendly. It was almost as if the football wasn't anything great. There wasn't a great style or strategy to what you would say, oh, this is Hearts being progressive away from the Stephen Naismith era. This is suddenly a better standard of football, a high press, maybe little triangles of football. There was none of that.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, like, I mean,
coming up front.
You look at it, and the stick is being used to beat Critchley rightly. Is his record in big games. He's not winning big games. He's, you know, the games that really matter to him, they're just not performing. However, where I would say, what is a really important point here is that if you remember last season, what made Hearts third? Lawrence Shankland. And Lawrence Shankland has scored 4 goals in 40 games this season. 4 goals in 40 games. You had a guy who was offered 10 grand a week twice in January 2024 to sign, turned it down for reasons best known to himself because he thought he would get a big move. Didn't happen. Now it looks like the backside's falling out of the empire, and you've got a real problem with Shankland now, because do Hearts offer him a new deal? Current evidence hasn't really to do. So where does he go? They need to replace him, they need to get goals in the team. That probably, for me, papered over a lot of cracks last season, and what we're seeing now is something a bit closer to reality.
Yeah, but again, you know, the Lawrence Shankland conundrum is all to do with Lawrence Shankland. As a collective, I'm looking and saying to myself, okay, if he doesn't score goals, then you have to, as a manager, your job is to try and work out plan A, then plan B. If he's not scoring goals, the fans are looking and saying, right, fine, he's not scoring goals. Let's see the structure. Let's see the way you play. Yeah. And I've watched the way they play, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not great to watch.
Shankland was so effective last season because he was getting great ammunition and his delivery in for the wide areas and all that. You're right, the structure at the moment is passive. It's like lacks invention. Hearts, middle to front, were exhilarating to watch for spells last season, and Shankland was a massive part of that. It energises everything around Tynecastle when they play that way. They've just lacked that authority in the game, but it comes from intensity, and they lack that, and I think that's the reason why they have failed to reach.
Chase either, Partsy. There's not a bit of pace in that team at all.
No, there's nothing wide that suggests you either put the fear of God into a team. But the one thing, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. You're right, you know, maybe he deserves the summer transfer window to try and change it, and then he's got his chance to put his imprint on the side and get more out of them. If, however, as is the nature of football these days, that he in the end, the board decide to replace him, obviously this semi-final this weekend is massive for him, and of course he's got 6 games, which how you motivate the Hearts fans to even want to go and see it is another matter. But if he's not there for the start of next season, one of the things that I cannot believe pre-Neil Critchley that I thought they should have gone for, if I was looking at a manager and saying what I want for Hearts to bring a freshness to the squad, to bring a freshness to their approach, to bring a freshness to the way they play, and the way modern football is going, I would have gone for John McGlynn. Falkirk play progressive football, high press. He's learnt off Brendan Rodgers. That side plays the way that you like to watch. They did it in the League One. They did it in the Championship in the consecutive year. They're going to win the Championship. And over and above that, he worked under Jim Jeffries, Billy Brown. He knows Hearts Football Club. For me, he would have been the obvious choice before they got to him.
I was sure you were leading up to Stephen Robinson there. I was sure you were leading up to it.
But of course,
I was just over you, John McGlynn.
No. Of course, everybody last year before Neil Critchley, I was sitting on this couch with you and a number of other people saying, yeah, Stephen Robinson's credentials, he should have been the man to get it. But I'm looking and I'm saying to myself, well, Stephen Robinson's in a plan, in a structure that he's absolutely happy with, and they didn't want to go there, and they suddenly pulls a guy out of nowhere, Neil Critchley, who effectively has been a low-level coach in the background of...
Does that go back to my point about the weakness in the board, the lack of football knowledge that's there? John McGlynn, when he stares you in the face, it has to be football snobbery to a degree that doesn't... It doesn't make John McGlynn a credible figure for that club, which mystifies me, but I can see it. Stephen Robinson probably suffers from the same thing.
Yeah.
I just think the decision makers at Hearts don't have the CV or the pedigree or the contacts. I don't know who they are.
Hang on, just one point there. Okay, I take the point, but the decision makers when it came to appointing Neil Critchley were Jamestown Analytics.
Yeah, I get that, but that's...
So you know, if you've got that arrangement with them, if you're going to do that, if you're going to do it with players, and they were absolutely integral to picking Critchley, you've got to go with it, you've got to run with it.
Yeah, but Neil Critchley's name is spat out by a computer, right? And I think, as Peter says, the gusto, the verve, the exhilarating pace in the flanks that John McGlynn's Falkirk teams plays with, I don't need a computer to tell me that John McGlynn was an obvious choice. They had to bring somebody in left field because the computer has to justify itself. If they went with a John McGlynn or a Stephen Robinson, it's just not computer-esque. Do you know what I mean? It's like they had to bring a left fielder in.
Well, you got to back the technology that you're promoting.
Well, there was a Norwegian guy, wasn't there? Who was who were pretty close to, but I think he changed the goalpost later on.
Well, I would say is, like, obviously I would have went with somebody like John McGlynn, and certainly Stephen Robinson have touted for that job on many occasions. And as I say, I think it is football snobbery that they've not went for these guys. But now that they have gone with Critchley and it has been backed by Jamestown, I think you've got to stick with him no matter what happens on Saturday, because you've got to give him the summer. You've got to see if this is going to work. It's worked everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, so, listen, can I tell you something about Edinburgh?
You're either in or you're not, that's what I mean.
Well, let me tell you something about Edinburgh.
Well,
and it's worked for David Gray. it makes logical sense to say, well, you know, you've got to give him the summer to get his own players and build his own side. See, when you've got fans who are absolutely at the doors.
And Hibs are doing well.
Right, there's a massive difference.
This is
here,
another
right?
thing,
Let
yeah.
me say
Fans
this.
would have been at the door if it wasn't
When
David
Neil
Gray.
Critchley got appointed, I was there when he walked into the room for the first time, and I nudged my colleague. He went, "Not having him," and it might have been
ridiculous.
really, really fierce, right, and
can't do
critical,
that.
right,
I
because
don't know who his mate was.
hold on a minute. He just lacked presence. Do you know, he's a nice guy. He just didn't fit the role for me. He just look at Hearts and Hibs, compare them, right? They've got Malky there, who's got contacts at Gogo, whose recruitment, Hibs, the evidence of the chemistry around the club, around the dressing room, you can see it. When they beat Hearts, you could see the whole place galvanised together. That speaks volumes.
Yeah, but hang on, that wasn't the case in October. If you look at the situation, if you look at Rocky Bushiri, who they were ready to push out the door, who was widely regarded as a lampooned figure,
Yeah.
he wasn't a good defender. Now people are talking about him as one of the best defenders in Scotland. So 3 or 4 months ago, people were talking about this Hibs squad saying, gut them. Get them out the door, they're too expensive, they're not justifying their existence.
And the manager.
recruitment's terrible, yeah?
And the manager.
Aye, absolutely. And that Monday, when they put the kind of statement of kind of like confidence out, I suspect if they thought they had an alternative option where they could have pulled the trigger, I think they would have.
Yeah.
I think if it wasn't David Gray that would have pulled the trigger, fans would have been at the gates.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because he's such a beloved figure at the club and a legend.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
also
like,
he's
got a bit of
he's
grace.
shown resolve and grit.
Now he has,
And
yeah,
he's
obviously, right.
filled the role and he looks the part.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah.
Even,
The only one
he thought his time was up though.
Yeah, the only one thing I would say that we all have to do, and I you know, you've had countless managers down through the years have walked in a door and we look and we think, you know, is this the right man for the job? Whether it's being a journalist or whether it's being someone who studies through a computer analysis or whether it's a chief executive of a chairman, your eyes don't deceive you. And you must give someone some time. I would never walk into a press conference with a manager and say, I don't fancy him. You know, I'm not saying don't.
Who walked into the room that day, Ange Postecoglou, pitched up at Celtic and
Absolutely,
said,
that's true.
he's the man.
You
Yeah,
get
I know.
instinct.
Nobody.
I spoke to a Hearts player who had been out the team, and I spoke to him 2 weeks after Critchley was there. I said, how's the new manager? He says, I don't know. He hasn't spoken to me. That didn't surprise me. You know, you get an instinct with things. Hearts is a big club that needs a big personality, somebody to really tie the whole thing together. I just don't see it with Neil.
Yeah, well, listen, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure about big personalities. I'm more into what can somebody get players playing? What can they do? Do they know a player? Do they know, can they recruit players that want to play in a specific way that is easy on the eye and has got a massive support in Hearts that suddenly, you know, can galvanise them as well? Because when they travel in great numbers. The flip side of that, as Stephen rightly pointed out, is, you know, a David Gray, parts you're right. You know, there was a moment at the bottom when the Hibs fans were grumbling, but the one thing that saved David Gray is, well, I think 2 things saved him. One of them was that Hibs had this reputation of not giving any manager any time. The board was suddenly getting flack because they were sacking people. You know, Sean Maloney said to me on this very couch, I thought they were going to sack me after 4 weeks. He said, because what they told me is what the remit wasn't what the remit was by the time I got 4 weeks into it. They'd taken the rug from underneath me. So, you know, they had a reputation. We were all critical of it. They're sacking managers too quickly. Jack Ross bumped out the door. So it bought David Gray some time. The other thing that I think bought David Gray some time is the fans were not at the door. They were looking and were worried and wondering and asking questions. But because David Gray had that little bit of what I would call time and love and affection for what he had as a player in that cup final, I think that bought him a little bit of time.
I think this really is as fickle as a 96-minute equaliser by Rocky Bushiri saved David Gray.
Possibly,
Easter
yeah.
Road in a 3-3 draw with Aberdeen. Esther Sokler makes it 3-2 in the 94th minute. And you're thinking, I keep telling this story. I was doing the 9 on, remember the 9 on BBC Scotland?
Yeah. Did that not change?
I can understand.
Did that not change to the half 8 and then the quarter to 7?
I can understand that nobody. I can understand nobody was watching, so nobody saw it. But I was doing 94th minute, and Sheila McLaren is interviewing me, and she says, "Oh, that's Esther Solko scored for Aberdeen. What does that mean for David Gray?" Well, he's a dead man walking. He's done for. He can't possibly say, "Oh, hang on, hold that was out. It's 3-3." Well, as I was saying, he's a good guy, David Gray, you know. And he, yeah, but,
by the way, although we didn't watch the 9, we're going to get a hold of that tape and we're going to go to David Gray and say, by the way, this is him when you were 3-2 down.
He absolutely will. He will.
When you've got that statement that you make that a manager's job, you don't care about his personality and it's about getting players playing the system and all that, is that not a massive red flag, though, that Stephen Naismith got the best out of Shankland and the stats were sensational? But Neil Critchley has failed to ignite that flame again.
But it's not as simple as that.
I get that.
There's so many layers to it. People filling his head full of nonsense saying you'll get the move to Rangers, which you undoubtedly would have loved. Rangers weren't in a financial position to push the boat out. Or you'll get this move. You're playing for Scotland. You've scored for Scotland. You know, all of these things come into it. And then all of a sudden he's sitting there. Nobody came in for him. Nobody came in and said, here is a bid. And the reason I know that is because in the background I was being told nobody's in for him. You can put all the speculation in the back pages all you want about this one's interested, this one's interested. Nobody made a bid, Graham.
And how much money has he lost in that time, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. And how much credibility and stature, because he's dropped out of it, you know. So from that point of view, now suddenly I'm looking at them and they're playing against an Aberdeen side that, you know, Aberdeen get worked out very, very quickly by the Premier League teams, because that fantastic run that he was on, and everybody was talking about Jimmy Thelin as a visionary, and then all of a sudden you get managers who suddenly say, right, I now know the way they play. You know, I'm now going to negate all these little positives that they've managed to sneak the 1-0s. Then they go on this disastrous run, but now Aberdeen have bounced back, and since the start of February, they've only lost 2 games, they've won 6 and they've drawn 3. So he's suddenly got the bandwagon back together again.
Yeah, well, listen, they've spent a bit of money in January, haven't they, and backed them, which always helps. They've brought in some good players. I'm not convinced with all of them, but I think they've definitely tightened up the defence, and that's been key for them. They're not shipping goals. I thought they were good at the weekend, the first half, but the second half I thought they were very passive. And you know, if you'd asked me at half time on Sunday who's going to win this game on Saturday, I'd said Aberdeen out the park, no problem at all. But that was a wee bit, they were slipping into kind of bad old habits in the second half of that game. I couldn't believe they let Rangers back into it, to be honest, with the state Rangers were in at that point. So, yeah, interesting times with Jimmy Thelin. I don't know quite what to make him yet, to be honest with you. You know, I thought at the start they were winning games they probably shouldn't have. They were then losing games they probably shouldn't have for a spell. And now they're kind of losing some, winning some. So, jury's still out for me.
Yeah, what do you make of them?
Well, as you said, the last 10 games has been okay. He has steadied the ship. I haven't had enough experience to know. He's not a guy who you're talking about. You walk into a room and you make an instant judgment on a manager. You wouldn't walk into a room with Jimmy Thelin and think, big personality, big character. But there must be something there. He's clearly an intelligent coach. Again, they've improved.
Sorry to disturb you, but they got hammered at Kilmarnock and they came in after it. And I said, Jimmy, an opportunity for you to go and bare your teeth, get your fangs out and let your players know. He said, no, there's other ways to communicate with players and all that. Again, you get instinct. What drives a dressing room, what gets reaction.
Well, he got some reaction.
He did. The barnstorming start they had was magnificent, but it's negated with a catastrophic dip. I mean, that was almost...
It's still largely the same group of players, though.
It's a hit and a miss team. We're a hit and a miss team.
Well, can you not give a team... I mean, listen, I watched them and I went up to watch them on a regular basis on this great run. And I'm up to Pittodrie and I sat there and I looked and I went, OK, let's see what's so special about this team. And I looked at them and I thought, 2 holding midfielders. The boy Nielsen takes it off the back 4, so they don't need to actually play football. He can take it off them, he builds everything. So there's the first thing, and I thought, right, there's their experienced 32, 33-year-old. Shinny's got a wee bit of life back in him because there's somebody doing all the impressive passing. And then you've got the flank, and I thought to myself, is Keskinen got a trick? The answer's no.
Well, actually, funny enough, you're talking about Thelin. What do you think of Thelin? I thought he got it wrong on Sunday. because actually Graham Shinnie was doing a great job at left back, and Keskinen was probably the best I've seen him for Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And he took them off. So he moved Shinnie back into the middle, and he just changed the subs. I don't think he got his subs right.
But my point on
Again,
that,
on Sunday the same.
yeah, my point on that, Stephen, is I looked at them and I said, right, and I now know the way they play. And I'm now looking and seeing what's so special about them getting the results, eking out the 1-0s. The big guy that they quickly offloaded for the mistakes, always a red card or yellow. Rubizic. You know, suddenly that back line had managed to keep things tight, and they were stealing games 1-0, and they were scoring goals. And then obviously they bring in Naismith as well and try to get him up to fitness. But I just thought that credit must go to the managers who eventually work out the style and say, right, this is
A
how
lot of those early games were favourable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they get touchy about that, but they were favourable. A lot of games at Postecoglou, a lot of games in the League Cup against lower league opposition and so on. There was always going to be a tipping point. Everybody expected it. I think as Patsy said, I just don't think anyone expected it to be so catastrophic.
Yeah, who's going to win then, Hearts or Aberdeen?
Aberdeen.
I'm going with that, Aberdeen, yeah.
Hearts.
I'm going to go.
Always contrary. Always contrary.
I know.
Never
I'm
going to give you right.
He's just slaughtered the manager.
Just need it more.
He slated
By
the
the
team,
way,
slated the manager. Hearts are going to win.
Don't be surprised if Shanks is the main man.
Can I just say, despite the friction between you two, let me tell you
Can't
this.
even look at him
Let me
anymore.
no, I know exactly. But let me tell you this: as I sat for years and years with Hugh Keevans, and I used to say, "You're a hypocrite," and he goes, "In this business, hypocrisy is a noble art," and we all deal in
He
it.
paid many a bill, I have to say.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go for Aberdeen in this one because I haven't seen anything from Hearts which suggests to me they've got enough to derail Aberdeen and get them into the final. St Johnstone Celtic's a different kettle of fish. Again, when we're talking about somebody with a wee bit of charismatic approach to things, and then you look at the way what he inherited to what they're doing now, St Johnstone, I look at them and this year alone, 7 games, drawn 3, lost 6. They've won 7. They've beaten Celtic in the league. Everybody had them written off 10 points adrift, but he's got a trick out of them. And I think there's a freshness about Valakari that might come to the fore when they're in the Championship. I don't see them doing anything against Celtic on a huge Hampden Park. But I'll tell you one thing, if you're looking at the cut of his jib, I like him.
Everything about this suggests that Celtic should go and take a few goals off him. Motivation, size of the pitch, the occasion. I think St Johnstone have a fairly modest number of fans going compared to their opponents. So yes, Celtic should do it. It's all got to be all about the league. I don't. What's the points at the minute? Is it 5?
Yeah.
5. What I love about the split is it does crazy things. I don't rule out the possibility when they're against their nearest rivals. You might have Hearts who've given up the ghost. You might have Ross County who can be flaky. You might have Dundee who give away goals for fun. Anything can happen. There's 5 points too much, possibly. But I think it's going to be thrills and spills in the final weeks involving St Johnstone.
Yeah.
What I love about Valakari is that he came in and he took a whole lot of stick about his style of play and being too open and being too naive about the Scottish game. And he recognised it. He didn't say, no, I'm sticking to this way of playing and that is it. And he would have taken them down. No problem at all. He actually changed. He's made them harder to beat. He's got a good goalkeeper in, which was the first
Big thing
he had to do.
Yep.
Because the goalkeeping situation there was comical. It was like Mark Birighitti at Dundee United. A bad goalie can take you down. So he sorted that out. The boy Andy Fisher, sensational against Celtic, but solid in all the other games as well. And that's been a massive difference. And I love that about him. He's got principles and he sticks to them. However, he's not naive, he's not daft. And he knew he had to stiffen up a bit and he's done it.
What we want to find out is, did you go into the press conference with the Scarlet Pimpernel journalist that we don't know? Did he say to you, I like the cut of his jib or I don't like him? We want to know.
Last time we were on here, he called him effeminate. So
He might even be sitting with us just now.
Okay.
Again, not hysterical, not over dramatic about their impending doom. That gives them hope. I like that about him. He's brought pace into the team. I do like the cut of his jib. He's got a cultural element to him which I like. He likes to smell the flowers and he's got an earring and he's got... there's something different about him. And if there's a manager equipped to take the club down, it's probably him. because it's not the end of the world. He's got other things going on. He can see a bigger picture. And that's maybe a good thing for St Johnstone. The timing is right.
Yeah, I think they can reset in the Championship, can't they?
Yeah.
They just reset.
And they're going to stick with him no matter what, no matter what happens. And
I think they're on the end of a 5 or 6 nothing.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me, but it shouldn't concern them too much either. As Stephen's saying, it's crazy to say it about a Scottish Cup semi-final, but they've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. Everybody Celtic?
Celtic, but I don't think it'll be a hammer.
No.
I think it will. I think there's a big difference between playing in a McDermott Park pitch with no grass on it to be playing at Hampden Park, and I think it'll be 4 or 5.
Stephen?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. We mentioned there, and I think it's worthy of mentioning before we, throw this topic away, that we were highly critical of Neil Critchley, but we've got to be highly positive about Hibs because if you look at the situation where he's under pressure, Stephen made the point that suddenly he's under pressure because there's nothing worse than your city rivals, really cranking it up to 11, to use the old Spinal Tap situation here, because he's got 14, drawn 11, lost 8, and 17 unbeaten in the league. It's incredible.
Stephen, they do a highlights package. It's been a historic season. It is. 76 years since they've done that. I think they have to do the Derby sunshine in Leith after the game. You see the unity and the happiness within the dressing room. The boys, you can tell the chemistry in that dressing room is exactly taking them to where they are. This is not a great league. A lot of it's mediocre. See if you can get the chemistry right. David Gray's managed to inject perfect harmony, confidence, and that's been the secret. And I think you could see it after that game. You can tell dressing rooms that are united, and that can be enough to take you to the historic run they've been on.
Yeah,
He also changed the system, didn't he? He went to the back 3, and I think this is a massive thing for Rocky Bashiri. You see some of these defenders who, when they're in a 2, they look as if they're absolutely hopeless.
Yeah.
Go to a 3, they've got a wee bit more insurance. He brought the boy Jack Iredale in, who's been sensational. And suddenly Big Bashiri looks like a world beater.
Yeah.
So I think he's got credit for that. He recognised there was a massive weakness at the back and he's tweaked it.
I like the fact that you said he changed the system, because the system has worked effectively because, Stephen, he's managed to get the 2 Cadden brothers. The boy Nicky Cadden's delivery is the best in the league by an absolute mile.
Terrific.
And then you've got Boyle suddenly avoiding injury. And then you've got a situation where you can even bring on a seasoned campaigner in Gale who just scores goals that he's almost passing them into the back of the net. So suddenly you've got people scoring goals, but what you do have, which he would have seen David Gray at United when he was a kid, is you've got people with delivery into the box, and when you get service, you're always going to score.
Funny enough, I think Nicky Cadden was injured. Was it the Celtic Cup game? I think it was. And when he went off, I thought, oh, because he'd been outstanding.
Yeah.
As you say, the best crossover ball for me in Scotland. And they dealt with it. He was out for a week or two, a few weeks, and they were okay. They were fine, because they, just what Parts have said, they've just got so much right. Someone sent me a stat the other day there, and at the risk of offending my learned friend by using a computer geekery stat, they were listed as the 4th most improved team in the top leagues in Europe in the last 12 months. So the improvement has been absolutely startling. As I say, it all started that amazing night at Easter Road against Aberdeen with that 3-3 draw.
Yeah.
Just small acorns.
I was there that day. It was absolutely incredible. When Sockler scored the overhead kick, you're thinking, my God, you did fear for him, but you were hoping that they would show some resolve and stick by him. I had certainly, said on countless occasions, I hope they stick by him. Slightly biased because I like David Gray as a person as well. But since the 14th of December, Partsy, they've lost 1 game to Celtic, and other than that, it's just relentless.
And Rocky Bashiri is a poster boy for that confidence surge. Again, it engendered itself. That moment, it does maybe take the one thing to get everything moving forward again. But the manager and his coaching staff have clearly done a lot of work, done a job in creating a disorganised team on their knees and lifting them back up. That's a success story of this season.
What do you think of Kieran Bowie? I think Kieran Bowie is Scotland potential.
Well, I'm amazed you said that, and I'll tell you why, Stephen. I'm glad you said that, because I was sitting with John McGlynn and John worked with him at Falkirk. In fact, Raith Rovers, I beg your pardon. And he said to me, he's a future Scotland striker.
Yeah.
That was only 48 hours ago. He said, mark my words, he's a future
Only
Scotland
22, physicality, knows the way to go. I think he's got everything that could really get him in that squad quite quickly, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Couple of things I want to get before we finish, and one of them is I noticed a post. I think it was in LinkedIn from one disciple of golf and the Masters. We all know how great the Masters was and that dramatic finish to it. But one of the things that struck me was, the post. I can't remember who it was that mentioned that they were at the Masters, but they highlighted the fact that the fans are treated with respect. And there's competitive pricing. This is not one of these. It may well be perceived as an elite golf major because of the setting, because of the history that surrounds it. They're taking care of the fans regardless of the perceived eliteness of it.
Do you want me to tell it again?
Fire away, son, if you've got a line.
The one thing the Masters is safe from is one of Donald Trump's tariffs, so it's going to be cheaper. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'm laughing. You're almost fumbling it.
It's a delivery. Listen, I was at Hampden on Saturday, and where was it? In fact, I wasn't. I was at Somerset Park on Friday night, and £4.50 for a steak pie, which a lot of it's inedible at times. I mean, £2.50 for a drink. Yeah, it is a rip-off.
I'm absolutely delighted. I've got two daughters who hate football. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, it saved me an absolute fortune.
Two sons that love it. It's a nightmare.
Well, can I just be complimentary towards Motherwell? Can I be complimentary towards Suzanne Reid, who, in a commercial sense, is trying to tap into the family community, what they're trying to do there at Fir Park. We went over to Fir Park, a good few hours beforehand to film a little mini documentary on what they were doing with the beer garden. Obviously, there's a real hullabaloo at the moment about football fans being allowed to drink at matches in the concourse inside the stadium. But the beer garden ahead of it was filled with, a few ultras. Just respectable Motherwell fans and kids who could get a Coca-Cola and you could have a beer in a brilliant surrounding. Admittedly, it was a beautiful day, but it was still a beer garden that welcomed the fans, and eventually it got busy, and it was really, really good. And I think Suzanne and her team really tried to tap into the community and offer them things that make it a whole experience, beyond the 2 o'clock, let's get in and pay our money at the turnstile. Yeah,
they've really switched on. I was at school with Suzanne, funnily enough, so I do know her, and I know she's
Did you get a free pint?
No, that's probably the only place in Motherwell I've not had a pint, funnily enough. So I'll need to remedy that soon. But no, I've heard all about it. A couple of guys I know were there, and they said it was a great setup. And yeah, I mean, the club are always trying things like this, and Suzanne's really at the forefront of that as well. Trying to just any kind of extra revenue streams they can get, which I think is why drinks should be allowed at the football, funnily enough, but maybe not open that can of worms. But
well, no, I want to open that can of worms. I'll tell you why, because what was it? Was it a month or 2 months ago, was it, the First Minister was interviewed on TV and he said, the evidence shows that football and drink don't go. Well, here we are. Where is that evidence? Yeah. Has he produced it yet? Has he shown it? The SFA and the SPFL are taking a softly approach towards this. I've asked them a number of times in recent weeks and they don't want to comment because it's a bit like Keir Starmer with Trump, softly catch a monkey. They want to just kind of reel it in and see if they can make diplomatic progress. But this is ridiculous. That this 40-year-old banning order is still in place. Based on what evidence? Where is the evidence? Yeah. When are you going to produce it?
In England, there's not been an upturn in violent scenes at football.
Well, the thing is, Graham, you can try it. Listen, he might be right. He might well be right that football and alcohol do not go. But until we have we conduct a trial and we do it in controlled environments, we'll never know.
Well, what's the risk at a Ross County Kilmarnock game, for instance? Let's say.
No, I disagree on this. I don't think there needs to be a trial, Graham. I think quite simply they need to reverse the law on this. The law's there. It's just basically they're enforcing it differently towards football fans. I don't think there needs to be a trial basis. I think, Gordon, you have a situation where you can go to Transmit and you can go and get plastered. And if you are out of order and cause some kind of ruckus, a fight, or you break the law, you're arrested by the police because you've broken the law. You can't conduct yourself properly. If you go to a concert anywhere, if you go to anywhere where there is a large gathering, if you go to a rugby match and you are out of order and you break the law, you're arrested. That is the nature of it. There is a persecution, as Stephen rightly points out, from 40 years ago. It doesn't need to be a trial here. There needs to be an implementation of the law is fair for everyone. It's not one law for the elite or the middle classes and then one law for what you would call
classism,
this perceived common man that can't conduct himself properly. You should be allowed to have drink at the football, but if you break the law because you can't conduct yourself properly, you're arrested. Not let's have 3 weeks of trial, and if 12 people are arrested, we're not giving you your rights back.
The argument for not having drink at football games falls down with the fact is if we talk about football stadiums on a Saturday not being full of people who have had a drink. Yeah. Now, a lot of people that I know that go to football batter as many pints as they can.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
2:30 race to the ground. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
If it's going to be the case they have it within stadiums, the habit of the football fan and the drinker is not to rush. Now, there's always going to be people that will drink a bottle of Buckfast before they go in. That's a minority. People want a civilised experience. But running at a pub, chasing pints down your neck is surely not as good as having a structured, social, responsible environment.
So we all point to Germany as being this kind of fan utopia, right? And they always look after the supporters. I was at Celtic Leipzig a few years ago, and before the game, 2-3 hours before the game, the stadium was full of thousands of fans on the concourses, milling about, having a good time, drinking a pint, not a bit of bother. It was the same at Villa this year. You're going down at half time, and you're going down to the press room, and you're struck because there's guys standing drinking pints in the concourse.
Yeah.
But it's civilised and it's...
I was at Stade de France last summer for Scotland versus Ireland in the Rugby World Cup. There was 90,000 people inside that stadium. The whole concourse was awash with pints.
They're handing you a carry-out as you walk in, aren't they?
That happened to me at Murrayfield once. I was
Yes,
going to
rugby, sir, here you are. Take a carry-out.
I was going to go in somewhere and I was at Murrayfield. I was changing at Edinburgh and we're handing out cans of tenants in the street to the rugby fans.
Right.
A promotional thing, I couldn't believe it.
Over 1 million pints sold inside the Stade de France on that afternoon. Now,
Press.
well, name no names. You're right.
They were given to his mates who absolutely battered it coming out of the pub.
Well, you walk to Murrayfield and all the bed and breakfasts and hotels along the road leading up to it have got marquees outside with Guinness sponsors and all that. Right. I don't understand where this argument comes from.
Yeah.
I always hear you can tell the football fan from the rugby fan with the fact that the football fan walks in the middle of the road and the rugby fan walks on the pavement. Right, but that's an old kind of...
It comes from a place of total and utter classism.
It is.
It comes from a place where you have basically politicians in a bubble of Holyrood or Westminster, whatever you want to call it, who have next to no dealings with football fans until, of course, they don a kilt and go to Euro 2024 for a picture opportunity. That's different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, I've seen wrong behaviour at rugby. That Haymarket train, 8 o'clock, is a human zoo,
Yes.
right? But people know how to behave, right? As you say, there's a law. If you break the law, you'll get punished for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you only have to look at the royalty that was at the Villa game. I mean, I'm sure he'd a couple of scoops before he eventually got into the limousine to take him away. I'm just saying.
The guy running along. Did you see the guy running along the touchline after the goal? He was right into the camera. Homer Simpson.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, if it's good enough for the heir to the throne, it's good enough for. It's good enough for Parsley's mates. Who like
Donald Trump, we've got Prince William. Who else?
We can get them all in. Listen, at one point, I think we managed to get Nelson Mandela on this programme. For what reason, I do not know. On this programme, somebody mentioned Nelson Mandela, and I never thought we'd get him in.
We're talking about Elon Musk every week as well, of course.
Exactly. We can get anybody in here. We can jimmy them in. As far as, just before we finish, we've got a couple of little points that I wanted to get your thoughts on, lads. I think Motherwell and lots of other clubs, incidentally, deserve great credit when they put on something to make it a spectacle. We need to embrace more of that. Of course, one thing that's coming fast and furious towards us is the summer of change. Everybody thinks football's a glamorous life. You know, footballers have fortunes. They don't. they go out of contract, they wonder where their next shekels coming from, and we're talking about recruitment. There's a few players who are going to be out of contract in the summer right across all of the Scottish Premiership and beyond. Some will be lost to the game. Some others might have that ability to sign a contract with a good club, especially if they're out of contract. They'll get a fair chunk of money. I was looking at what I think might be 5 really good players that are available. Greg Taylor, Lawrence Shanklin is going to be available to someone. Martin Boyle, although Hibs do, I think, have a 1-year option on him if they kick that in. Yanis Hadji. And I've thrown in Mikel Mandron. I mean, I liked him a couple of times I've seen him as well. I think St Mirren have a couple of players that I think are well worthy of someone's eye. Is there anybody else that you think?
Oh, yeah, I find it.
Olasanya at St Mirren as well.
Olasanya, yeah.
I was looking at it's funny. I was looking at Hearts the other day. With Craig Gordon, get George Grant, Barry Mackay.
Yeah,
Interesting as well.
forgotten man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this trend now, isn't it, of clubs signing players on short-term contracts quite a lot in the Premier League. You know, there's a reluctance, not so much at the top level, but certainly in the bottom half, to give 4 or 5 year contracts these days. Maybe 1 year, 2 years. So you have a.
Stephen, I've got a contract in my house, 6-year contract that I signed under wee Jim at Dundee United.
Yeah.
Only 6?
6 years.
Well, you did well there.
Yeah. And have you still got the actual
Well, I
contract?
must not rated you.
I lasted 6 months.
How many times did you fined during that contract?
Oh, listen, I broke records. Talk about Hibs' record, mine was better than that.
Yeah, I would love to have been there if you'd have walked in and said, "Look, I know I've got the 6-year deal. It hasn't quite worked out, but I'm just going to sit it out." Can you imagine him? Oh, you'd have been out in Benbecula playing football. Yeah, football. Listen, that's the other thing about it, which becomes all too evident. We're talking about players that are available that could be good. There are other players who are going to struggle along the way, and equally so. I've got 5 that I think. Have you anybody else that you got in the footballer sense? You know.
I think Taylor's an interesting one, just when we're touching on him. I thought he was excellent on Saturday. I thought he made a real difference to the way that Celtic played. Now, obviously, Kelly weren't very good, but I think he's going to be a big miss for Celtic. Kieran Tierney coming in softens the blow, but he's not going to play every game. So
I think until he's gone, I wouldn't rule anything out.
Yeah,
I
agree with you.
absolutely. But it's whether Greg wants to sit there and.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, yeah.
20, 30
Yeah.
games when he could be playing every week.
And I've picked 5 managers that I think could be on a sugary peg. Okay, do you want the 5? Or do you want to throw a few in? Ange Postecoglou on his way out. Ruben Amorim.
I think he'll get the summer.
Yep. Barry Ferguson.
Yeah, I think he'll win his way out.
I mean, I think
I think he's done well, but actually, I mean, you look at the record, it's what, 4 wins in 9, is that right? You know, I think Barry's done well, he's got a reaction out of a group of players who looked on their knees,
yeah.
but I think there's limitations to where that can take Rangers.
Yeah, I only put Barry Ferguson on the list because I quite simply think if there is a takeover, they'll not want to bring in their own man. That's the only thing that's going against him. And I did point out, I don't think he can stay in the building, Parsley. I think you either give him the job or you don't.
I agree with that, and I think this could be a launch pad for Barry now to get re-involved.
Yeah, it could be,
Look and broaden his horizons, you're right.
Yeah. I think he's conducted himself well.
Brilliant. He's been so calm, he's said all the right things.
But then he does, you know, as anybody who's dealt with him knows, this image that he's got publicly with particularly opposition fans is completely wrong.
Yeah, well, listen, he worked here for 3 years and he was absolutely fantastic. And of course, you know, it's his dream job, the Rangers manager's job, and if they gave him it on a permanent basis, you know, he'd be the happiest man in the world. I've put Neil Critchley in there.
Well, the one that fascinates me is another Neil, and that's Lennon at Dunfermline.
Yes.
Because that's a fascinating situation. That could be impacted by events elsewhere, depending on a Hamilton disciplinary hearing with the SPFL. They you know, are going to try and fight the possibility of a points loss for losing their bronze licence to entry. So that could be another factor. But if Neil Lennon keeps him up, it's a fascinating project. Does he stay another year?
I was at the Dunfermline game on Saturday, and he's clearly a man that's enjoying being back involved. He's bouncing again, and they will stay up. Queen's Park look as if
that's
they
a
win
fair
a game.
point, yeah.
And you talk about the politics of Hamilton.
I think this could be his last job. He wanted one more job, one more project. And if he keeps them up, then suddenly that owner will say, right, let's have a go at trying to win that
It
championship.
might also bring them to other people's attention. For some reason, people have been overlooking Neil for a lot of jobs as well. Again, we're talking.
Cardiff City were interested in him, certainly.
Yeah,
That's a possibility.
And let's be honest, Dunfermline are a big club. They just need somebody to light a match under it, and who's better than Neil?
Yeah, but the worry there, Patsy, is how they do it, because James Board has come in and they're throwing big money at it.
Yeah.
They're willing to throw big money at it, and for the kitchen sink, they're going to try and blitz the championship next season. They're going to be signing players, I'm told, from Bulgaria for like £300,000 in the summer. Don't have a name there, but they're going to put good money into it, try and get themselves right up to the Premiership. And the obvious concern is, what then if or when the novelty wears off? Now look, this is not something you need to foreign owners. Look at what's happening at Queen's Park just now, and that can happen with
Big
everyone.
difference though. I was at Queen's Park on Saturday and there was 600 fans. I was at Dunfermline last Saturday, 7,500.
No, absolutely, but equally that was the case when Gavin Masterton was there as well.
Right.
So it can happen anyway.
Yeah.
7,000 fans is good, you're absolutely right. They're a big club, like Falkirk, they're a club who probably belong in the Premier League, but does that sustain the kind of money they're going to throw at it? I'm not sure.
I had Ruud van Nistelrooy in there as well. It's a Stonewall certainty. I think he'll be gone in the summer. Anybody else that you think might suffer the...
Neil Critchley will survive.
Yeah.
Purely because I don't see the strength around the club to make a decision to oust him.
Right, okay. Just 5 that I think will be under pressure. Some that I'd like to see stay in their positions, but I thought I'd throw that in. And the last point, I was actually going to talk about Falkirk, but I think they deserve a greater period of time on the Journos, so we'll do that next week when hopefully they've got the championship in the bag and returning to the Premiership. But last point, Champions League, Aston Villa and Borussia Dortmund, they certainly pushed PSG and Barcelona all the way. Are we seeing the two possible winners in PSG and Barcelona?
Well,
Arsenal are the favourites, aren't they? So, I mean...
I wouldn't know because I tried to watch the Aston Villa game
Yeah.
on TNT, which I paid for at the start of the season expecting to do that, and then discovered it wasn't on, it was on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to sort that out.
I had Amazon Prime, it was great.
was great, aye.
It's a really good game. Really good game.
I was switching between both and kept missing the goals. Like that way.
The thing with PSG, somebody, I read a comparison last Saturday, right? It's like PSG in the Champions League latter stages are like Rory McIlroy coming down the back nine at a major. You just don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
You can see the nerves jangling, you can see every human emotion. The question is, can they get there? And then last night was quite a big thing for them because when Aston Villa turned that around, you thought they could fold here. Yeah. They could fold, but they held on.
Half an hour to go,
Yeah, they held on, they clung on, and they got there. That could be a psychological thing for
They're a better
PSG.
team now, aren't they? Like obviously when they had Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar, you're thinking that on paper this is
Yeah, the
unbeatable.
collective is
Yeah.
It wasn't a team.
No,
so
exactly.
Now it's the collective's much better.
And just to finish on that, I mean, it's difficult speaking to Parsley because obviously he doesn't have the full package. But we obviously enjoyed Amazon Prime.
In many ways.
Mind boggles.
And when we watched it, I don't know about you, did you see the amount of pundits they had on? They must have been paying them an absolute fortune. The array of talent that they had for the build-up was quite incredible.
This is what you've got.
Well, I was going to say, I've taken a Jeff Bezos, I've just taken a leaf out of his book. People will be tuning into the Journos this week going, wow, he's got McGarry, McGowan and Partsy on. And there's friction.
Hang on a minute.
I've never heard of any of them.
I have it in good authority. Your man's got a fire stick, right? So all that talk about I've got the package.
That's a scurrilous,
Well,
defamatory
to be fair,
accusation.
I wouldn't worry about it because anybody in Lanarkshire who hasn't got one, people are looking at them as if they're some kind of dimwit.
I live in Inverclyde, so it's...
Yeah, exactly. Slightly different. And of course,
I know a guy if you want one.
we've got Tam McManus on, who has got 35 tellies in one room where he can study all the games and maybe catch the goals that Graham missed. Listen, great to have all. I don't know when I'll have this package again, but it was certainly enjoyable having different voices on today on the Journos. I hope you enjoyed their opinion and, of course, what they had to say. Give us your thoughts on all of that. And hit that subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. Thanks to Stephen, thanks to Graham, and thanks to Gordon as well. Thank you to you for listening and watching.